Hello, everybody, and thank you for watching Soul Talk. I am pretty excited. We've had our guest on last month, and he's coming on this month. Last month, we talked about how to get more energy and vitality in your life. Today, we're going to talk about the subject of Fukushima, and Bob's going to remind us kind of what happened, and then what we can do about it. And what we like to do on this show is to kind of talk. These are the things that are happening. This is what can happen, and then this is what you can do about it, type of thing. So obviously we're going to bring Bob on the line. Hi, Bob. How are you today?
Very well, Jeremy. How are you?
I am doing great. I can't complain at all, and it's been a great weekend. I relaxed and did took some time for myself. So
that's great. I went for about an hour-long walk on Sunday down by the water, all downtown St. Petersburg, by all the boats and everything. It was really great.
Very cool. I haven't been down there in quite some time, so very cool. So let's talk about, I haven't, it's been a while since I've thought about this subject, but it was brought up actually at the Free Your Mind conference that I was just at. And, people brought up the concerns about Fukushima again, and I had thought about it, and actually other than you and I talking about very briefly a couple of weeks ago. So can you remind us what happened? And
sure. Well, it's been a while. It was in 2011 when the tsunami hit Japan. It was actually March the 11th and 2011, and that day there was an earthquake that was a 9.0 earthquake. It was like the fourth strongest earthquake ever recorded in history. And there was an ensuing tsunami. And at the time that it hit the coast of Japan, the wave that hit was 46 feet high. And it was, as you can imagine, quite devastating. The nuclear reactors at Fukushima, which is a city, is not all the way to the north, but kind of 2/3 of the way up, and it's on the east coast of Japan. And this earthquake was about 30 miles off the coast, and it happened 15 miles down, and it created this immense tsunami that hit the shore. When the earthquake occurred, the sensors at the nuclear reactor site actually shut all of the reactors down, and unfortunately, they really were not prepared for a wave that size. And when it hit, it destroyed all of the reactors and knocked out the emergency generator systems and caused a meltdown of the fuel, and it also created explosions in 2 of the reactors, hydrogen explosions that spewed radioactive gas into the air. And they had to evacuate people from that area for quite a ways, 8 or 10 miles in a radius. They had to have everybody leave that area. What also happened was about 4 or 5 days before that, TEPCO, which is the Tokyo Electric and Power Company, had report to the Japanese nuclear provide a report. So what would happen back in the 1890s? And the report was prepared like 4 years earlier, but they never submitted it because they said they didn't see any urgency and making any changes or preparations. But they did submit it just on the 7th, I believe it was, 4 days before the tsunami hit. And they said that basically if there was a tsunami that was, 10 meters or about 35 feet high, what would happen? And even at that, they needed to take corrective measures. But this wave that hit was 46 feet high, and there was just no chance.
So can we back up just because you broke the internet connection got really kind of slow there for a second. So you said it was 1990 or 1890?
1890s. They had a tsunami and an earthquake back then. And so they knew that was something that was possible. And so the safety agency in Japan, the nuclear safety agency, had asked for a report from the Tokyo Electric Company that owns the plants at Fukushima, what their preparations would be if such a thing was to happen again. Well, as it turned out, there probably wasn't anything they could do because no one was ever anticipating a 9.0 earthquake.
Wow.
So the plants themselves, the reactors themselves, were pretty much destroyed, and the hydrogen gas plumes that went into the air had radioactive iodine in them and other radioactive isotopes. And then quite a bit of radioactivity leaked into the water and into the ocean. And that's why you see people with so much worry, because the levels of cesium in the Pacific Ocean on the coast of California have doubled just over the last couple of years. And it's getting worse. So we have to realize that this is a situation where this ocean where the disaster was is a shared ocean. The Pacific Ocean is like a third of the world, and the water has all kinds of currents. And so if you get toxins into it, especially radioactivity that has many decades of half-life, cesium-137 has a 30-year half-life. So it's going to stay in the water, and it's going to create problems, and it's going to drift, and it is going to affect the marine life. And that's what the concern has been all along, that these reactors are continuing to leak. They haven't stopped. And as a matter of fact, about 6 or 8 weeks ago, reports started coming out that the amount of radioactivity that was leaking was increasing. And the TEPCO had been working on inventing robots that they could put down into the reactors to investigate and examine them and try to figure out what to do next, which they have been able to do very little so far except block some of the groundwater from escaping. But as they were able to get these robots ready to go, now you're talking about 6 years later now, they put 3 different robots down into the reactors to look around, and they thought that the radioactivity that would be emitted would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 sieverts. And a sievert is a measure of radioactivity that takes into account the type of radioactivity and its negative effect on human tissue. And so normally they measure radioactivity in grays or GYs, but then if it looks like it's going to actually have a negative effect on humans, they have a multiplier that then is called a sievert, named after Maximilian Sievert, that was the one that came up with this measure. And so they put this first robot into the reactor, and they thought that they'd be able to look around for about 10 hours. But after about 2 hours, the robot started to break down. The radioactivity was essentially melting the robot, and they had to pull it out, and it actually was only able to last for 2 hours. So they were able to determine that the amount of radiation coming out from this reactor number 2, is actually in the neighborhood of between 300 and 500 sieverts, which is much more than they had thought by quite a bit. And So they then put another robot down, which was a cleaning robot that they were going to look to see if they could use it to start cleaning things up. And it also only lasted for 2 hours. And the third robot they sent down ended up getting stuck down in the reactor, and they were not able to retrieve it. But they were able to retrieve quite a lot of video footage and pictures, that some of which they have shown, and they did find that there's a substantially large hole where the corium had melted through this retainer area. And corium is what results when you have radioactive material, and as it melts and combines with the building material of the building itself, it forms this substance called corium. It's about 2,000 degrees centigrade, and they're concerned that it's probably already melted through the 25-foot thick cement barrier underneath, and that it's melted through into the ocean and the groundwater. And so you've got a fairly serious situation where there isn't really any way for them to stop it. They cannot entomb it like they did at Chernobyl because of the underground caves at the site, and to put enough cement on top of it to contain it would actually probably make the whole thing collapse into the water. So they're not going to be doing that. They estimate that whatever it is that they come up with to try to extract it and contain it is probably going to take about 4 decades before they're able to get the leaking under control, and will probably cost in the neighborhood of $300 billion to do it.
Wow.
So this is the current concern, is that reactor number 2 is leaking this radiation at the rate of somewhere, call it 400 sieverts, which is extremely high. And it's going to continue to increase the amount of cesium that's in the ocean, all around from, Alaska all the way down into South America is affected by it. And you also now have, Jeremy, an issue where when you have evaporation from the ocean now, it's actually evaporating radioactive material into the clouds, and it's raining down onto the land many hundreds of miles inland. The rain now contains radioactive cesium-137. And so there's no way really to escape it, that the whole world will experience cesium poisoning from the reactor, and no one's really quite sure what's going to happen with all of this radioactivity now at reactor number 2. So it's that's where we are currently with it's like the disaster that won't quit. The tsunami was 6 years ago, and it's worse now. The problem is worse now than it was 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now you also have an Olympics is coming up in Japan in 3 years, and a lot of the work and the maintenance and the mitigation efforts at Fukushima actually are not going to start until after the Olympics.
Oh, wow.
And they actually are considering having some of the Olympic events at venues in Fukushima. So they're trying to just kind of squeak by till after the Olympics are over, and then at that point they will start their major mitigation efforts.
Wow. That's substantial. I mean, and then that can contaminate and you said this affecting from Alaska all the way down into, I'm sure, even into Hawaii, and so.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's widespread, and it's now raining down in part other, inland. So I know some people that are actually measuring the level of radioactivity inland, many hundreds of miles inland from the shore of the Pacific Ocean, and the levels are rising in the land, up in Canada and in the United States. So the point being is there really at the moment is not a way to escape it. And so the question then becomes, what should we do to try to keep an eye on what's going on, know what the levels are, know what it is that you can do, and if the levels continue to increase, then what should you do in response to the increase so that your body doesn't get negatively affected by the radioactive isotopes.
So when we're thinking about that, what does a person think about it? Because I was born in the 70s, so I was still a part of that fear of nuclear holocaust. My mother talks about bomb shelters and stuff like that when she gets, of course, this isn't the same thing, but there's a fear just from that of, radiation poisoning and stuff like that from things like nuclear reactors and stuff like that. So, that programming is in people's heads, and of course, it's very real too. So, what are some things that they can be doing now when they're thinking about preparing for that?
Well, what we first need to understand is what's actually happening to human beings that are exposed, that have a dose of radiation that's, in this case, happening over a long period of time. And the main thing that occurs inside a person's body is damage to your DNA. So when you have a radioactive isotope, they're actually emitting particles that are so highly energized that they can actually break the bonds in molecules and atoms, and it creates these double ion facing ions, so they call it ionic radiation, and that's what ends up cleaving the bits of your genes in your DNA. So DNA is in pairs, and quite often you'll end up with radiation that will hit a part of the gene and actually cut it so that it's ineffective. And certainly when it comes time for replication, you wouldn't want that gene being replicated. It would cause all kinds of errors and damage in your body. And you have to also know that human bodies are under constant attack from radiation, both from inside your body and outside your body. There's radiation from the sun, from the core of the earth. People are exposed to medical radiation. People are exposed to high levels of radiation when they go up in airplanes. And then also internally, your body's producing radiation as a part of aerobic life. Your body produces its own internal radiation, which is constantly damaging your DNA. And so human life, in a sense, is this race within itself where your own bodily processes and your environment is constantly damaging your DNA, perhaps as many as 1 million hits per cell, every day to your DNA. And so what occurs then is your body has to repair the DNA constantly. So a large part of your genome and a large part of your energy of your body is spent repairing DNA. And if you didn't have DNA repair as a part of your life, you would live for a very short amount of time before the replications that occur would replicate with errors and mutations, and then your body would have all of the damage in it. Another thing that's really important to remember is that when you have radioactivity like cesium or strontium-90, it's not only the direct effect on the DNA, but also our bodies are 60% water. And when water is exposed to radioactivity, it also becomes highly reactive. And so H2O can very quickly become two molecules of oxygen bonded together, which is superoxide. And superoxide is highly damaging free radical that causes more damage in your body than any other free radical or radiation. And when you get exposed to something like cesium, it turns a large part of your water into this superoxide. And so you end up with this double whammy of the direct damage from the cesium and then also the damage from the superoxide that's produced. And so what happens to your cells is after this damage to the DNA, that your cells essentially have three choices, and one of them is to go into this state of dormancy, which is called sentience. So the cell basically stops in its progress, and cells are supposed to live and then die as they become damaged. Cells need to die and get out of the way so that you can replace them with new cells. But in this case, with radioactivity, the cell becomes old, but it won't die. So you end up with all of these very old cells that are in the way. And one of the things that can happen to those very old cells is they can become cancer cells. Another thing that can happen to the cell is simple death. You can have apoptosis and a whole number of cells can die. And in the case of poisoning, a lot of it happens in your blood. So if you have damage to the platelets, you're going to have trouble clotting your blood. And if you have damage to the white blood cells, you're going to get secondary opportunistic infections. And if you have damage to the red blood cells, you're going to become anemic. So that's the general way that people end up succumbing to death from radiation poisoning is massive cellular death from this apoptosis. And then the third thing is the cell could itself just simply immediately become unregulated cell division, and the cells would become cancerous, and that's a big risk for long-term radiation exposure is the risk of cancer. And so you have to know that those are the three things that can happen to cells, and then knowing that, you can craft a strategy to deal with those three issues. And of course, the first thing that you'll want to do is try to get as much of the radiation out of your body as possible. And just like if you were exposed to it, the first thing that you would do is get rid of the clothes that you were wearing, get rid of the shoes you were wearing, wash your body, because you can wash off what's clinging to your body that's going to continue to produce radiation. And the same thing, once you've been exposed and it's inside your body, you want to do an internal cleanse with compounds that will bind to the radiation and move it out of your body. And a couple of the things that you can use, one is zeolite, and zeolite is a honeycomb type molecule that when you ingest it, it seeks out heavy metals and other compounds, other minerals, and it will also seek out radioactivity and will absorb it into this honeycomb structure and then move it out of your body through your excretory system. And so that's the first thing that I would do, is to begin taking zeolite. And I would take it, cautiously, not all at once, unless you had a massive dose of radiation, like a half of a sievert or a full sievert of radiation. I would take it slowly so you don't detox from the radiation too fast. But I would build up to taking 30 or 40 drops of zeolite a day, and until you could document that you were free from the radiation. The other thing that works really well for binding up toxins and also in a number of other positive things that it does is SOD, or superoxide dismutase, which is another detoxifying molecule that's like a Pac-Man molecule that's seeking out superoxide and engulfing it and neutralizing it, and it's seeking out other toxic chemicals as well. And superoxide dismutase is present in a lot of different things, but where it's most heavily concentrated is in seeds, and particularly sprouted seeds. And if you can stabilize a sprouted seed, nutrient stabilize it, you can stabilize SOD as well. SOD, unlike radioactivity, has a very short half-life and only 10 minutes. So you can't really get SOD in a pill bottle, so to speak, unless you get it from a source that has purposefully stabilized it so that it won't break down while it's on the way to you, in the mail. 10-minute half-life is very short, and by the time it arrived at your house 5 days later, there wouldn't be any left. But we're fortunate to have a form of stabilized SOD that's within sprouted barley seed powder, that's organic sprouted seed powder. And even if you don't have radiation poisoning, you have to take it very cautiously because it will detoxify your body very quickly. So you can only take very small amounts at first, and you have to very slowly ease into it over the course of many weeks so that you don't detoxify too fast. But it's a great product for getting toxins out of your body. And remember, we said that a big part of the damage from radiation is from the water that's been damaged, right? And the water has been made into superoxide. So that alone can cause your body to break down. And but with superoxide dismutase, you can mitigate all of that superoxide with a very small amount of sprouted barley seeds. And so this is an essential strategy for someone that's been exposed to radiation, because even if you can get all the radiation out of your body, but it's already damaged a lot of your water molecules, you're still going to have trouble with superoxide.
So I was just to back up real quick, because you had mentioned something about detoxifying too fast. What happens to the body if you detoxify too fast? I mean, is that...
Well, whenever you're detoxifying, for the most part, your liver and your kidneys have to participate in the detoxification process. And they are constantly trying to keep up with detoxifying just under normal circumstances. So if you put an extra load of detoxification, because all of a sudden you've bound up all of these molecules, then your liver and kidneys will become overtaxed. And in the worst case scenario, if you go too fast, it could shut down, and you could end up with, kidneys and a liver that won't function at all. It is possible to detoxify yourself so fast that you would not survive.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
So that's the first part, is you want to try to get as much of the radiation out of your body as possible. And then you also then want to start looking at the three things that happen to the cells, so you can have a strategy for each of those. The first being the sensience that occurs where a cell goes into this very damaged, very old state and then won't die and get out of the way. And there are two compounds that, if you combine them together, will create a situation that will stimulate the death of those cells. And the first compound is called quercetin, and the second is resveratrol, which most people have heard of. Resveratrol is the compound that's in red wine. It's the French paradox, right? That if you take both the skin and the seed of grapes, especially muscadine grapes, there's a large amount of quercetin and resveratrol, and you can use it to create this accelerated apoptosis to get these cells out of the way that are lingering there and in danger of becoming cancerous. So you have when you get a product that's a muscadine product, you want to make sure that it's got both the skin and the seed so that you get this apoptosis effect. Otherwise, with just one, it won't occur. So that's one of the things you can do. And then the second is you want to also be able to deal with the fact that a lot of cells are simply dying. And if too many cells die, then you're going to get organ failure, and if you get vital organ failure, it's going to lead to death. So you want to be able to generate a lot of new cells to take the place of the ones that are dying off. And one of the things you can do is stimulate your bone marrow to produce more adult stem cells and release more adult stem cells. So constantly every day, you're releasing primarily from the bridge of your nose and your hip bones and your pelvic bones, you are releasing adult stem cells that are replacing the cells that have died off. And they're pluripotent cells that morph into every different type of cell in your body. And quite a while ago, more than 20 years ago, it was discovered that a particular type of blue-green algae, if you ingest it, stimulates your body to make more adult stem cells and to release them so that you can regenerate faster. And it certainly wasn't originally created for the thought of radioactivity, but it was for regenerating people faster that have had strokes or just simply want to recover very quickly from workouts and that type of thing. So we can add to our regime of taking quercetin and resveratrol and like that. You can add in a product that will stimulate your body to make more stem cells. And it's really, really valuable thing to do, but depending on your age, you may also want to do something additional, because if you're 50, 60, 70 years old, when you make adult stem cells, they are not very young cells. They're new cells, but they're new old cells. And the reason is that they're lacking a growth differentiating factor that's in abundance when you're 20 years old, but as you age, you make less and less of GDF11. And so you end up making these older cells, and eventually you're making 70-year-old cells and 80-year-old cells and 90-year-old cells. And that's part of how we age. So in order to not do that, you need to be able to infuse growth differentiating factor 11 into your body. And you can do it with blood transfusions from a young person who's got lots of GDF11, not very practical. And the other way you can do it is from a technology called bioetheric energy transmission. And we've actually been able to embed GDF11 into crystals in these discs. And the doctor in Orlando that has the technology has been able to create a Tesla coil that activates these crystals. And in this case, with the GDF11 vibration in it, you again can hold this disc over to your nose and your hips and infuse it in there and have GDF11 in your blood and waiting for the stem cells in order to infuse them.
I was just looking for his website. I was going to say something about Dr.
Yeah, I think it's bioetheric.com. I don't know if it's up on the screen, but certainly if people want to call us, we can help them get in touch.
There it is. Here it is.
Learn about that.
Bioetheric.com. And while I'm on the subject, we just mentioned that Bob's website is boomerboost.com. Bob Gilpatrick is the president of Boomers Forever Young. And if you give them a call at 800-861-4609, or just go to their website, just mention Soul Talk or Jeremy McDonald. And I guess it's not Bioetheric. It's a K.
I think it is, but his site has been down for a little bit because he's making all kinds of new changes to it.
Okay.
And so the best way, if someone wants that technology, we have his phone number that here, and we could not only that, but once people receive it, we can help them to use it.
Okay, that works best. So just remember 800-861-4609 or boomerboost.com, and they'll get you in contact with Dr. Kersey, the technology he's talking about. So
yeah, very cool stuff. One other thing that you can do is I've been talking to some people at a crystal store about Fukushima, and they were worried about it too. And they have malachite that they say has a positive effect in mitigating radioactivity. And they have this crystal shop in St. Pete that's called Crystals, Bangles, and Beads, and they have malachite there, and they have other crystals too that they say are very highly protective against radioactivity. And I wasn't surprised to hear that they knew about it, but that's another thing I'm gonna be watching what's happening with the levels of cesium. I have a malachite stone that's on a necklace, and if the levels continue to go up, I'll start wearing that every day.
Now you gave me a place to go check out in St. Petersburg. I didn't even know about that place.
Yeah, they're on Corey Avenue, on the north side of the road on Corey Avenue.
Very, very cool.
There you go. Really nice people.
That sounds awesome. So it sounds like there's a lot so far. There's a lot for us to be thinking about. I mean, this is happening, so it's very real. People know about it. We remembered on the news, from 2011, and now, it's even, as you're mentioning, it's getting worse in a sense than what it was before. So, but there's actually things that we can be doing as opposed to just worried about it and thinking we're helpless. So,
yep, absolutely. If people are interested in the regime I was talking about, they can certainly call us and we'll help them to get each of those products. They're not expensive. It's not, like you have to spend, thousands of dollars to protect yourself. The advancement of the science in the areas of nutrition has come very fast just in the last couple of years. And so you have access to more and more potent compounds that are in natural products and also in products that have been put together specifically for purposes like this. But if somebody wanted to just get started with a couple of things, I would make sure that you have some zeolite at your house. And it's good to do a cleanse with zeolite anyway, because people have been picking up tire dust and fumes from automobiles and toxicity from the water and food, and, including glyphosate and mercury. And zeolite will get all of that out over time if you use it consistently. So it's a good thing to do as a preventative and a cleanse, and it's a good thing to have in your cupboard, should the radioactivity become a lot worse. You'd want to use it every day and have your body already be used to it. And then, of course, if people wanted to have access to the superoxide dismutase, not only is it excellent for helping cleanse, but it's the holy grail of anti-aging as well, since your body is actually aging primarily from the presence of superoxide. That's the byproduct of road life.
And that's what you were talking about with the water.
Yep.
The fusing, and I didn't understand everything you were saying, but it made sense that it creates this.
It creates superoxide, which is two oxygen molecules put together, and so that becomes highly reactive, and that's not a way that you want to have oxygen in your body. You don't want two oxygen molecules bound together. You want the oxygen molecules to be singular, or in the case, mixed with hydrogen to create water, but you want them singular so they can bind into the hemoglobin molecules in your red blood cells and be delivered to your body in that format. And because when you can deliver oxygen, that's what actually makes beings like human beings able to expend so much energy. And it's, because of being vertebrates, we need to be able to expend a lot of energy. And the hemoglobin molecule was a major evolutionary impact on life on Earth, because being able to carry oxygen in the hemoglobin molecule and store it in myoglobin also, and the presence of a circulatory system to deliver it allows us to burn glucose at a much, much more efficient rate than if we did not have oxygen. So being aerobic beings, we can very efficiently burn sugars to create energy. And so it's like, you can have these beautiful oxygen carrying molecules, these massively beautiful proteins with iron in them that are carrying oxygen. But as soon as you allow two oxygen molecules to bind together and free float, they're going to destroy your body very quickly. And thus the need for superoxide dismutase, which is coded for in your genetic code, and your body does make it. But again, as you age, you make less and less of it. And that's why people age faster as they get older, because they have less SOD to fight off the oxidation. So each year you begin to age faster than you did the year before, unless you can ingest superoxide dismutase to supplement your own body's ability to make it.
I think it's interesting that, we talked about on the last show that, but there's part of it's also not only the toxins we're putting in our body that start us aging, but it's also, the body it's producing things, but eventually it starts producing less and less, and we start aging. And then the foods that we eat don't really necessarily give us the nutrition to supplement or give our bodies the way to reproduce the things that we need to reverse our anti-aging. But if we we change that and add what we need into our body, we can reverse some of that process and become a lot healthier. So it's pretty interesting, And here we just thought we just had to do four meals a day or 3 meals a day and do the 4 food groups.
Yeah, it won't quite do it these days. The soil is so depleted that our food is grown in, and it's so contaminated with pesticides and tire dust that your body has a tremendously difficult time fighting off the negative effects of the toxicity. So without a very wise strategy of supplementation and detoxification, human beings have a very difficult time leading and living a healthy life for 8 or 9 or 10 decades. Most people will get sick much sooner than that because of the accumulation of the toxicity from the outside and the production of your own toxicity.
So you mentioned a couple times tire dust. I had never even thought about tire dust in my life, and that's just normal car tire dust, or from the tractor going in the fields and stuff like that.
Well, tires, are constantly being eroded as they drive on the road. So, as you see a tire goes bald, well, what happened to that tire? It actually was being eroded by the concrete, and little specks of dust are floating up into the air. And there's a lot of it because there's so many cars. And it'll float up into the air, up over a mile into the air, and then spread out. So even if you don't live nearby a highway, you could live on a farm 5 miles outside of town and still have tire dust coming down on top of you.
Wow.
And of course, then also the fumes from the cars themselves are adding to it, and then the stuff that's coming out of airplanes and ships, especially ships that are coming over. That if you live in a port town, you are exposed to much higher levels of toxicity than if you don't live in a port town. So if you live in a port like Tampa Bay or the New York Harbor, the ships that are coming in are massive polluters and create substantial problems for human beings to live nearby a town that has these ocean liners coming in.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Never put that together until you just said that. I never really thought about that. But of course, when you live in a city, you smell all that, and you're ingesting all the stuff, and that's something really to be thinking about. So
yeah, and you want to be able to get it out. You want to, on a daily basis, consume compounds that are going to cling to the toxins that you took in and move them out of your body as you go through your regular excretion process. You want those excretions to have the toxins in it and leaving. And the way to have that happen is to have chelating agents that will grab onto the toxins and then move them from your body. And so if you do it on a daily basis, where you can take a few drops of zeolite every day, consume 4 or 5 teaspoons of sprouted barley seed powder, then you then are able, almost no matter how much toxicity there is, you're able to get it out of your body as fast as it's coming in.
And they can get the barley seed powder, I know, from you at Boomer.
Yes. So. Yeah, we get it from northern Canada, and where it's all organic, and it's grown in these amazing farms where the soil is tended to with probiotics and minerals, and with the intention of making it as healthy as any soil in the world. And then the barley is grown in those fields, and it actually grows twice as high as normal barley does because the soil is so fertile. And they produce a seed that is much larger than regular seeds, and they're able to sprout them all at the same time and take them through the process and then stop them when they're at their peak of nutrition, stabilize all the nutrients, and then grind them into a powder for us. And they send it to us, by the ton, and we have a formulator put it into jars for us.
Gotcha. Wow. So on the subject of what we've been talking about with Fukushima and stuff like that, is there anything else that we need to think about or tell people before we're in the show here while we're talking about it, to wrap up and stuff?
Well, I think that the main thing is not to panic about it. A lot of people are really freaked out about Fukushima, and it is what it is. We're probably not going to be able to do a lot in the next 10 years to slow down the rate of radiation that's coming out of those damaged reactors. And it is going to continue to rise the levels of cesium in the oceans and on the land. And that's if no other nuclear disaster happens. There's not another tsunami or a meltdown in, a different plant altogether. But if you pay attention and you watch what's happening and how much radiation there is, and then have your plan, have your tools, your SOD and your zeolite, so that you yourself can keep your body clear of the radiation, and then also have a cellular regeneration strategy with the blue-green algae and the quercetin and stem enhance, so that you're constantly rebuilding yourself with fresh new cells. It would take quite a very, very high level of radiation to overcome a person who was incorporating that strategy. And so the point is, don't panic about it. Be smart about it. Have what you need in order to take care of yourself. If the levels keep rising and, God forbid, there's another tsunami that hits Fukushima again, it'll get way worse. But short of, a massive, massive disaster that would expose you to, 2 or 3 sieverts of radiation, you're probably not going to die from it if you do the right things.
Okay. Very cool. So I just want to throw it out there again. Bob's website is boomerboost.com. And I didn't mention this at the beginning, but in the last show we talked about it. Bob is a holistic nutritionist. I hope I'm getting that correctly. And so he's been working in this business for quite a long time. And you can find out more about him at his website at boomerboost.com. And if you do call or mention them or go on their site, just mention Soul Talk when you go in, or on their website, use the Soul Talk code as well. So, Bob has always been a great show, and there's a lot of information that I'm sure even I'm going to be going back and watching it and learning some new things. And the people watching this, I hope you definitely learn some things that's going to help you, because that's kind of the idea that, there are things that happen in this world that are beyond our control, and we can either be really, really scared about it, or we can do what we can about it. And we can use things that are positive to help us, at least protect ourselves and cleanse our bodies and do what needs to be to protect ourselves. So, I guess that's all I have to say. And thanks, everybody. And we'll be having Bob on next month. And I'm not sure what we're talking about yet, but he and I will discuss it. And we'll be coming out next month. Thanks. Many blessings.
Thanks, Jeremy.